So we've covered what your character looks like. We covered where their background comes from. We've talked about their family and what their home life was growing up. So now we're going to be getting into the occupation. And this is an interesting one because so many times when you're looking at, for example, a fantasy game, Lord of the Rings Online is a great example of this. You spend a lot of time with the character creation of how to design their appearance. And there's even various things about what part of the world they grew up in. That's going to affect their hair color, eye color, and skin color. And we don't really care, though, about who they are essentially as a person. I mean, granted, as a game, the character is who is going to be played by the person, and so the character is what's going to be developed. Well, in a book, these characters exist long before the events of the story actually happen. So these characters, they have to have been doing something. And so in this video, we're going to be diving into how to develop that element of them, and also talk about ways that that's going to help make the story even better in the future. So if this is your first time joining us, excellent. Basically, we're just working on developing characters for particularly a fantasy story, but these traits will apply to basically any other story. And with this particular one, we're diving into the occupation. And what I really like about occupation is this also is going to affect how your character thinks and behaves and what kind of skill sets they're going to be bringing to the table. So when you look at a lot of young adult fantasy, especially the urban fantasy stuff that's taking place in a modern day setting, you're going to have the main character is likely going to be 18 or very young adult, and most often their occupation is going to be student. Now, student is great because you have this opportunity for a character to be able to learn, and they're kind of required to learn as part of their occupation. You're going to have other characters that are in retail. They're going to be baristas. So you've got either a customer service from a food standpoint or a customer service from a retail standpoint. And these are going to develop things such as their character interactions, how they're going to respond to people of higher status or lower status than them. It's going to deal with, again, basic economics, so how they make money and how they earn a living. And their occupation is also going to affect what their living condition is going to be like. So like I said in the last video, we talked about where they grew up, what their home life was. Well, if you've got a character that's living in a very good household with their parents still, it's their parents that are going to be having the main money. So their job, the character's job, is most likely going to be for pocket change and for getting a little extra spending money, or maybe they're trying to save up for something that's really, really important. So with those kind of occupations, it's more of a side thing, and it's a important part of the character, but it's not their main means of living. Now, on the other hand, if you had a character that was in college, for example, and they had another job as the barista or as a waiter or as a retail worker, then that money could be actually the means that they can go to school. And so now that job is going to have a much different role. Well, other times you're going to have characters and they are not going to be in school, so they're just going to be in the real world living and doing stuff. And in that case, their job is most of their life. Their job is going to determine what their living condition is like. It's going to determine who their friends are and what their friend group is going to be. It's going to determine what kind of time that they have available. And so it's going to provide a different kind of setting out of necessity than it would if they were under someone's assistance. So everyone is going to have some kind of a job. And here's the other thing. You might have a character that actually has no job. They are just completely unemployed, and they might actually have no motivation to get a job at all. That's another interesting character thing, because oftentimes if that character is going to be a main character, a lot of their story arc is going to be discovering something that they care about, discovering something they're passionate about. And so much of the story really is just going to be a kind of a development of themselves, and basically an opportunity, not even so much to grow, kind of more so just an opportunity to start living. So there's a lot of, cool stuff going on there. Well, going off of the idea of a student is in school for a specific reason. They're there to get training to get a certain job. So with that, then I'm going to ask you, what job does your character want to have? And sometimes the character, again, they're going to have these goals before whatever adventure happens gets into them. They're going to have goals that are going to drive their future plan. If they have a job that they want, so say for example, that the main character is a farmer, and say that they grew up on their family's farm. Well, do they like to be a farmer? Some people, they'll start off in one spot, they genuinely love it, and then they will inherit the farm from their family, and they will keep the farm going. Maybe they'll even expand the farm. Maybe they'll actually grow it into something more. Maybe this particular individual, not only are they into farming, but maybe they're also into livestock, and so they want to actually expand. Maybe this character has a sibling that is actually much more into the farming side of things, and they want to branch out into the livestock thing, and so then they have essentially a split branch. That is a very good example of character development. You have someone who's in a field and branches out or expands said field. Now, if a character is in school, like I said, they're learning a specific occupation. Well, there are so many occupations out there, and here are just a few basic examples from a fantasy standpoint. Money. Anything having to do with accounting or ledgers or essentially taxes, people are going to use money. That's just how life goes. Everyone needs money to deal with commerce, so everyone is going to work in money. Now, on the retail side of things, there are people that genuinely do want to be traders. They want to actually go out and be merchants. They want to trade. They want to maybe even produce their own goods. So they want to actually produce textiles. Maybe they want to actually produce jewelry. Maybe they want to produce like metalsmithing. So they might want to do either blacksmithing because they just enjoy working with that kind of metal. Silversmithing, working with silver. Then you've got furriers. They work with horses. Then you've got weaponsmith, actually different than blacksmiths. Spoilers. But maybe they want to actually design weaponry. I don't know if you guys have seen the show Forging Fire. There are so many things out there as far as making weapons go. So it's, they're a lot of fun to just dive into just as a side research project. Keep that in mind. You got the various crafting bits. Now, you've also got stuff like soldier. You've got military, depending on what your novel or series is going with. You've got army, generally is going to be the land-based. You're going to have navy, is generally going to be all sea-based. You most likely are not going to have, for example, Air Force, depending on what your level of technology is. Marines, that's kind of a borderline tricky one. You might have individuals that specialize in sea to land combats, but mostly it's going to be a split just for simplicity purposes. But even with the military, you're going to have various styles that people are experienced in. You're going to have cavalry, horses. You're going to have spearmen. You're going to have swordsmen. You're going to have bowmen. Even with bows, you've got longbow, you've got shortbow, you've got crossbow, and all of these styles are going to be specially trained to be a specific role on the battlefield and then engaging in the army. Some people are going to want to be just a soldier. Some are going to want to be a leader of men. Some are going to be a leader of hundreds, leader of thousands. Some are going to want to be the full-on general of the entire army. So with military, there are many, many directions that you can go. But another cool thing, too, that I like to kind of dive into, even with the military, you're going to have the medical team. You're going to have the people that are either going to be the battlefield technicians. You're going to have the people that are part of like the MASH units, Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. They're out there close to the front lines to get people patched up so they can get back out there. An absolute huge necessity role. Then you're going to have the medical people that are going to be way away from the battlefield. They're the actual regular doctors. You might have a veterinarian. You might have a orthodontics. That's an interesting one. I haven't really seen an orthodontist in a fantasy novel, but why not have fun with that? But yeah, you got surgeons. You've got regular doctors. You're going to have, on that note, you might have alchemists. You might have people that are specializing more in potion style things. You might have apothecaries. People specialize more with herbs and natural remedies to create cures. So you've got a whole different, style going on there. And even with the military too, then you're going to have people like scouts. You're going to have essentially those rangers that can go out and can basically scout out enemy lines and then come back. Won't necessarily do much fighting, but because they can get out there and they can get information, then they're going to be absolutely necessary. Well, with that information, now you're going to have people like messengers. A messenger is one of the most important roles in any Shakespearean play, because if you think about it, most of the time back, actually, just take it to a modern setting. With the internet, we've got information at the drop of a hat. We can learn anything that we want. We can hear about anything, and it can be a matter of minutes before information can get across the Atlantic and actually be accurate. We get frustrated when a web page doesn't load in 5 seconds. That's what we've been able to understand and what we've been able to actually work with. Well, back on the Shakespearean day, people didn't get information unless it was brought to them. A king in one country talking to a king in another country, if they're not face to face, they relied on messengers to be able to get their message across. And it could be days in between a messenger being able to get there. It could be weeks in between. So in those situations, if a messenger got intercepted and killed, or maybe the message got altered or whatever, then you could seriously mess with a whole ton of plans going on between two individuals. So messengers were an extremely vital role for being able to keep communications open, for negotiating treaties, for negotiating trade, for really any dealings going on with a royal household. Well, also with that, maybe they're an actual noble. So maybe they are either the king, or they are a prince, or they might be a duke or an earl. Duke, duchess, earl, count, countess, all those things. I don't honestly understand all the details with them. So if that interests you, I would highly encourage you to do your own research on that and get a little bit better going on there. But when it comes to occupations, there are so many things that are just out there that a character can do. And with all the possibilities out there, what does your character want to do? Then, going off of the idea of a character wanting to do a job later on, now comes the ultimate question of what does your character want to do when they are older and essentially retired? What is your character's personal end game? Way too many times we think of having, for a fantasy story, the end is defeating that big bad evil guy. And while that is a very good end, it is not the character's end. One thing that I really love about Lord of the Rings is at the end of the book, so after the hobbits have gotten back to the Shire and that part of the tale is all done, then there's the appendix in the back, and they actually include a timeline of what happens to the Fellowship after the events of Lord of the Rings. And it's really, really cool because you see that Sam, he becomes mayor of Hobbiton for a crazy amount of time. Merry, he becomes big in his community. Pippin, he becomes big in his community. Talks about how Merry and Pippin still maintain a huge friendship all the way to the end of their days. And I love that little detail. Talks about how Aragorn, how he reigns in Gondor, and how he is making more connections with the Shire and reestablishing his kingdom there. Talks about how Legolas became a leader of his people, Gimli became a leader of his people, how they were able to bring dwarves and elves to Minas Tirith to help rebuild it and make it into an amazing, awesome city. And then it gets all the way down to the end of everyone, to the point that they either die or they go down to the Grey Havens. And so we get to see their end story. Well, what is your character? What do they want to do? What is their end game? Some characters, their whole arc is they want to die a epic death in battle, and that's it. That is what they are going for. Other characters, they just want to retire and sit on a porch drinking lemonade. That's their life. Other characters, they might have, after the big battle, maybe they want to do something with their newfound experience. So maybe a character that was a battlefield medic, maybe they want to open up their own practice. Maybe they want to take in some of those war orphans and actually train them to be medical persons. Something to basically leave a legacy. Maybe a character that was a soldier, they become a trainer and they want to stay out of the fighting but be able to offer their services and their experience to the next generation, and so build a generation. Maybe the character that wants to become a trader, maybe they get tired of traveling and so they want to build a shop somewhere and then have trade come in and out of it and basically be a trade hub. So maybe those characters want to build something else, or maybe the character just wants to leave everything all behind, go and build a cabin in the woods and just live out their days in peace and harmony. So when you are thinking about your characters, I highly encourage you to think about not just their current occupation at the time of the story or what they're training to be, but also what their occupation hopefully will be. Just, again, imagine if this adventure did not happen, what would they eventually get to do? And then lastly, what is your character's ultimate end game? Because this is what's going to make the character essentially live through whatever tragedy or tragedy is going on in the story, and it's going to give them a reason to keep going. It's going to give them a reason to look forward to more, and what it's also going to do is it's going to give the reader a deeper connection to that character and care that they can get the happy ending that they desire. So hopefully this was useful for you guys. Hopefully this was a lot of fun. I enjoyed this one. I enjoyed thinking about these kind of things. If you enjoyed too, definitely check out the other videos that I've got. Like and subscribe. Really helps the channel. Love you guys for it. So take care. Have an excellent one.